How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Average Joe, the series where I'll be taking a look at a vehicle and telling you whether or not I believe it's worth the average player's time, or in this case, their money. On today's episode, we're going to be covering the F-4EJ ADTW, which is a Rank 7 premium fighter jet sitting at 11.0 in the Japanese tech tree. With all of that out of the way, let's jump right into what this vehicle is capable of, starting with the weapons. Starting with the primary weapon, you're going to be armed with an internal Vulcan cannon. The Vulcan's very high fire rate, average damage per shot, and high velocity allows it to just chainsaw right through people. Now, if you clip them with only one or two shots, you're probably not going to do much damage, but usually, especially when you're hitting the fuselage, you'll end up hitting a lot more than just one or two, and when that happens, you will just tear through somebody. Now, the Vulcan does have one major drawback, and that is the fact that it fires so fast that you burn through your ammo incredibly quickly. However, this plane does have 640 bullets, which is more than enough for most matches. You very rarely would ever need to rearm just to get more bullets in this thing anyway, but even if you did, 640 is more than enough to last almost an entire game, basically without fail. And even if the Vulcan didn't have a lot of ammo on this plane, it's really not going to matter all that much because the secondary weapons are your real primary on this plane. Speaking of which, let's talk about them. Now, before I jump into the secondary weapons, I do want to point out I'm not really going to be talking about its air-to-ground capabilities, other than the fact that it can definitely take out two bases with a single bomb load. It is a very capable base bomber. However, I personally would use this as an air-to-air fighter in an interceptor. Now, there's two main missiles that you're going to use on this plane, the AIM-9P and the AIM-7E. We're going to start with the AIM-7E. Now, before really diving into the AIM-7E, it does just kind of look like your average radar missile. Now, if you look just at the stat card of the AIM-7E, honestly, it looks too good to be true for the battle rating. And that's because it is. Now, the missile says that it pulls 25 Gs, and that technically is true as far as I can tell, however, it has two main problems with that. One, whenever it turns, it loses an absurd amount of speed, and if it's not at high speed, it doesn't turn almost at all. And to pair with that, when you first fire this missile, it doesn't actually start turning for about 2 seconds after you fire it. As well, the range is not what it says. On the card, it says the lock range is 25 kilometers, and the launch range is going to be 50. And now, yet again, technically, I don't think this is wrong, it's just the missile is never going to reach that. In fact, I wouldn't fire these missiles at a target that's further away than 7 kilometers if I actually wanted the missile to hit. Now, this doesn't mean the missiles are unusable. I do get a lot of kills with them, especially against people at higher altitude. Basically, find somebody that's further away than 4.5 kilometers. I would not fire them closer than that at all. They will almost never hit at that point. Look at where they're going, fire the missile there, ideally between 6 and 7 kilometers. And if they turn and they actually properly, drop chaff and try and outmaneuver it, they're probably going to. But if they fly in a straight line or they just turn off in a direction and drop chaff too late, they're probably gonna hit. Unfortunately, you weren't given a very good radar to pair with these missiles. For some reason, they can lock targets incredibly far away, even at super low altitude. But the second that a target is within about 15 kilometers, if the target is not above you by a good bit and there is nothing behind them, the radar really struggles to lock onto them. It is also worth noting that you can carry up to 4 of these missiles. Next up, we have the AIM-9P. Now, the AIM-7P is a fairly standard IR rear aspect missile that pulls 20 Gs, has a fairly decent top speed, and basically no range. Now, the missile can reach targets as far as 2.7 kilometers away, however, I personally don't like to fire them more than 2. And usually, even within that 2 kilometer range, they're fairly easy to flare, with the exception of whenever the missile gets within about a kilometer. When this missile either gets within close range to people or is fired within close range, it has a tendency to just completely ignore flares, especially against hotter planes like Phantoms, or the Aardvark, or anything that has a very hot heat signature. Just like the AIM-7E, you can carry up to 4 of these missiles, meaning that you total 8. Next up is going to be flight characteristics. Starting off, your top speed is pretty decent. It's about 1330 on the deck, which does usually mean that on most maps you're going to end up being the first one to the battlefield. Now, there are certain planes that will outspeed you, like F-104s, F-111s, especially now that everyone has air spawns. Planes that needed to accelerate before don't really need to do that anymore at the start of a game. And so you're definitely not the fastest thing on the battlefield, but you are definitely not the slowest either. Now, when it comes to acceleration, well, you're pretty heavy. It's definitely not unbearable. It's definitely not. But it's also not the greatest. If you and someone else both dump all your speed, they're probably going to catch you most of the time. However, there are still some planes that you will out-accelerate. Next up, maneuverability is really bad. you are a very heavy plane and you're not even an agile Eagle Phantom, you are just a regular F-4EJ, meaning your turning is very bad, your sustained turning is really bad, you lose a lot of speed very quickly. Basically, if it gets to a point where you cannot immediately pull in and shoot the person and the other person's going to be given the chance to turn, you probably should not try and turn. Realistically, the only planes that I would ever recommend fighting in this thing are going to be other Phantoms, especially ones without Agile Eagle as well, and really the only other time that I would suggest it is going to be against stuff like Aardvarks or, well, planes that don't have a lot of energy or don't sustain it well, because then you can just kind of pull vertical with them, and, well, if they chase you, they're going to stall it before you, so if you can just survive for a little bit, you can just dive down on top of them when they stall out. Now overall, because of the weapon systems on this plane and the way that it flies, I highly suggest that you adopt a boom and zoom style strategy, go for people that are high up not paying attention, go for targets of opportunity, dive down on people with the IR missiles, do these sort of things. If you can find someone that's fighting someone else, perfect target. Can find somebody that's going to strafe a teammate, perfect target. These are the people you want to go for because these are the people that aren't going to pay much attention, and even if they are, you can usually still hit them if they're focused on something else at the moment. Now then, let's talk about some miscellaneous topics. Now then, let's talk about the countermeasures on this plane. Now, you do get 60 regular countermeasures and then 30 large caliber. Personally, I bring all the large caliber as flares because the engines on this plane are incredibly hot. And then I split the regular 50-50, so 30 chaff, 30 flare. Now, you can split it more one way or the other depending on if you think you're going to be fighting more radar missiles or more IR missiles in that lobby. This is just the personal way that I do it. Now then, I do want to talk about the radar a little bit on this thing like I did earlier. So first off, like I said earlier, this radar can lock people and even just see them in general from very, very far away. It's just whenever they do start getting close that it has a very rough time seeing them unless there is literally nothing behind them and you are below them by a good bit. Now, if there's a friendly near whoever you're trying to lock, it will struggle to lock just the enemy. It very often will even switch to the friendly. This radar also loves chaff, however, if you've already fired the radar missile and then the person chaffs, hold the lock, because you'll have about like 3 to 5 seconds where the missile will keep tracking the person instead of the chaff. The ACM mode on this plane is also very fidgety. Where the normal search mode might be able to lock something, the ACM mode will just be completely blind, and even the other way around at times. It's just worth noting that if you can't see them on the ACM mode, it is worth trying to switch back to search and then locking them that way, and the other way around at times. Because, well, the ACM mode on this plane can have its moments, it's just more often than not, those moments aren't good moments. Lastly, let's talk about the price of the vehicle. Since it is a pack premium, for $69.99 USD, you're going to get 20 days of premium, 2,500 Golden Eagles, and obviously the vehicle itself. Do I believe it is worth that price? No. However, if the vehicle is on sale, I actually do, because first off, this vehicle, it's rank 7, it can research the entire Japanese air tech tree. With, you know, the introduction of the F2, I definitely think it's worth having something that can do that. And on top of that, now that it has become, I think, my second most played vehicle in the game, and I think my most played air vehicle in the game, I can confidently say that if you know how to play the game, this thing is really good. Now, if you don't know how to play the game and you've never played jets, I don't think this is going to treat you very well. I think you're going to suffer if you're going to play this thing. However, if you have played jets before and you know what this gameplay is like already, this plane is going to work very well if you know how to work with it. With all of that out of the way, I'd just like to thank you all for watching. Please let me know in the comments if there's any other vehicles you'd like to see in the future of this series. Have a good one.